Hi, my name is David Reske, CEO of Nowspeed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of In the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Alan Gosenhauser. Alan is a fractional CMO, interim CMO, CMO executive advisor for health technology and SaaS software companies with more than 30 years of experience. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. You've worked across many industries in the past, in addition to the ones that I mentioned. What's your favorite?
My favorite is, I think, healthcare, health technology. I've been in a lot of parts of the healthcare ecosystem because it's making people's lives better, making communities better. And I've done a lot of work with SaaS software companies that have a recurring revenue model that's very dependent on customer experience and, loving customers and retention that I'm sure we'll get into. Also, I should probably mention the name of my company is Demand Revenue. It's at demandrevenue.com.
Great. If you want to find you, that's obviously the best way to do that. So that's really cool that you're working in healthcare because you're really making lives better. One of our points of differentiation in Nowspeed is that we feel like we're changing the world through the work of our clients, and you get to do that very directly through working with healthcare companies. So that is really cool. Do you like working with companies that are on the B2B side or on the B2C side, or doesn't it matter much?
Well, I work primarily with B2B and B2B2C companies. So in healthcare, you have a lot of B2B2C where you might be, marketing and selling through a health IT company that needs to influence docs and then to patients. So you have to understand both parts of the ecosystem. Financial services like that too. I have a little bit of direct to consumer experience, but it's not my sweet spot. So I'm not looking for B2C type opportunities. And most of my clients are either private equity or venture portfolio companies where I help them scale to the next level.
Sounds amazing, but very complicated. So I'm sure you've got some great experience to share with our audience today. So as you know, I like to start these conversations with what I call a mythbuster question. And the myth that we talked about was that you can grow your company by just focusing on new customer acquisition. True or not true?
Only true for startup companies. When they're beginning. So companies normally go through three phases. The first is getting problem market fit. And that's what startups are doing. They're trying to understand what problems and jobs people are trying to get done and offer them a better way of handling their problems and their needs. In that case, they don't have any customers yet. So yes, customer acquisition is very important. And if startups are successful, they get to a second phase, which is product market fit, where you want to make sure your products meet the market demand. And their customers are far more important. And it's not just about new customer acquisition. And then if you're very successful at that phase, the third one is platform market fit. The companies that are making a ton of money have actual platforms, and they want to make sure their platforms or, series of products and bundles fit into the market. But so I would agree with the comment you just made for all companies beyond the startup phase. It's far more important the customer experience you provide and how you grow with customers than just looking at new customer acquisition.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a great framework for thinking about the market and the different stages of a company. Let's kind of move beyond the startup phase. Let's say you've got a company that's been in market for a few years. You've got customers, you've got revenue, you're starting to grow, you're starting to expand. Maybe you're not at $1 billion yet, but maybe you're 10 million or 50 million. You're kind of expanding your company at that point. Can you grow? And this is from a marketing perspective, can you grow by investing in marketing and really focusing on new customer acquisition, really almost exclusively just drive new clients?
I don't think so. I think, as you get beyond a certain point, as companies get beyond a certain point and they're looking to scale, the way you achieve future success is by having a wonderful and leadership customer experience, so you retain your customers and you don't have a lot of churn. So when you look at future financial performance of companies, it's related largely to net revenue retention or low churn and the number of your current customers that recommend you and are promoters that bring you new ones. So a good source, if you're successful at loving your customers, will be them recommending new customers. And when you think about future financial performance, it's very correlated to those two things. That's not to say you don't focus on new logos and new business acquisition, but as you grow and scale, your customer base becomes far more important to your future growth. And if you look at some of the experts in this field, one is Fred Reichheld, who he's been at Bain for 40 years, and he is the father of Net Promoter Score. If you look at his book, he is saying that 90% of businesses don't get it right yet, are not really driving an excellent customer experience. And a lot of companies have issues with churn and net retention. And the economics work out that you need to lower churn and you need to keep your customers happy. A lot of it's common sense, but it's very true.
So that's a powerful stat. Let's dig into that a little bit. So if 90%, that's a powerful stat, that 90% of companies are not getting it right and having excessive customer churn. In your experience, you feel like that is a product problem? It's really like, we sold the product to somebody who doesn't really appreciate the product, or the product's got problems and it's kind of broken. And so they started using it, but they didn't use it for long. And so they churn. Or is it maybe a customer service problem often? Because like, hey, we're using the product, we love the product. Oh, service, this sucks. I try to get it fixed. Customer service doesn't respond. Nobody answers the phone. All of those kind of issues. Or is it a marketing communications problem? Hey, I'm using the product, I'm happy, but I never hear from the company. I don't really appreciate it. I get sold by a competitor while the company's sleeping. Or maybe it's something else. How do you kind of think about where the core problem is, and maybe in your experience, if it's across all those, how do you identify the problem?
So it's a little bit of all of that, but the way I would summarize everything is it's an alignment problem. I spent 6 years at Serious Decisions in Forrester, where I mentored over 108 chief marketing officers and marketing leaders. And I've also been a P&L general manager. So I've had all the go-to-market functions reporting to me in the past. And a lot of companies have an issue with alignment. So first of all, in terms of products, it's really important that companies have a clear understanding of their ideal customer profile. Who are the prospects and customers that will most benefit from their product and really be jazzed about it? And a lot of companies still don't have a clear ICP defined. If you're going after customers that are going to churn and that won't get the value, won't continue to use your product and tell everybody about it, it kind of begins there, which is a marketing and alignment problem. There are tons of companies that really suck at alignment. And to give an example, when I was at Serious Decisions, one of the founders did a study of 400 B2B companies back in, I think it may have been 2014, but it's still relevant, or 2017. And what they found was companies that were really well aligned in terms of marketing, sales, product grew 19% faster and were 15% more profitable. And I can't tell you how many companies I've had experience with where the alignment sucks. And it's, what's the ICP? What are we going to focus on and not focus on? What's the longer term, let's say 3-year strategy? Do all of the annual operating plans for each function sync up? Do we have a good way of measuring customer satisfaction or dissatisfaction, say Net Promoter Score, but not just measuring it in terms of the number, how to continuously improve the number? Do we look at what they're telling us? And do we actually take the actions cross-functionally? It could be finance. It could be the invoice isn't readable. It can be sales. It can be customer service. Any of those things, product, any of those things you mentioned, but you have to listen to your customers and understand what they're telling you. And more importantly, you have to act on that information. And then you have to take that and communicate back that you listened, or they're not going to give you any more input. They'll figure it's a waste of time. But it's a combination of a lot of those things, David, and I would put them under alignment.
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, wow. That's really powerful. And I'm going to unpack a couple of those ideas, through this conversation, because you've said a lot there. So I love the stat that you shared about companies that get that alignment right grow
Yes,
19% faster and 50% more profitable. That should get all of us sitting up in our seats and kind of taking notice, because there's a
it
big,
should.
big money involved in there, right?
Yeah,
And it sounds like you're saying that, the things that I shared about product fit, customer service, communications, those are all peripheral to the core idea that you have to get the right customer for your product in the first place. And this is where
right.
marketing
That's
can,
where it begins.
yeah,
Yeah.
get it. So let's unpack that a little bit. What can marketing do to really make sure that that is done right? So we're getting the right customer for the product, so that we have a better chance of keeping them for the long term.
I'm a big believer that I think CMOs, or chief marketing officers, should be the aligners in chief.
Hmm.
You know, obviously it's the CEO's first responsibility, but I think CMOs can really help there. I think it's important to get everybody together: marketing, sales, product, customer success, and finance, and really understand your customers, their needs, their pain points, how your products can align with the jobs they're trying to get done, to help customers get their jobs done easier, less expensively, more conveniently, in a better way, and really care about your value proposition, and then articulate it in a way that customers get it easily. And I think marketing helps in all of those areas. But, for companies, and I'm actually, one of my clients, I'm helping with that this coming quarter, figuring out their ICP. And it's a very large company as well. You would think that they would have had that, but, many companies, even large ones, haven't defined that well. And so, if it's a company that's looking to scale, you want to look at things like, you know, potential segments. What is the sales win-loss rate on the front end for prospects? What's the lifetime value? What's the churn? What's the gross and net revenue retention? Which customers are we keeping, not keeping? Which customers are profitable? Who do we want to go after? And as importantly, who do we not want to go after? And that's strategy. Part of strategy is deciding what not to do. And a lot of companies, want to do it all. They want to boil the ocean. But if you boil the ocean, you're not going to be effective at everything. And it's better to spend some time cross-functionally and figure out where the low-hanging fruit is, where you're going to be more successful, and then focus on those areas cross-functionally. And I've got to tell you from experience, both small companies, startups, and very large companies often have an issue with that. And yes, that's where it starts, but that's only the beginning. Then you have to ensure an excellent and leadership customer experience, and you need to do that cross-functionally. And a lot of it's common sense, but you'd be surprised the number of companies that don't get it right.
Yeah. So let's come back to that common sense piece. I think what you're saying is very powerful. And it seems like that's like the CMO job one, is to get this alignment right and get the market product fit right, and make sure that
Yes.
we're all going in the right direction. Focus. In your experience, what are the things that pull us away from that? Because it's so easy to kind of get unfocused. We might say, hey, my perfect customer is this size company in this industry, in this geography, and this is the buyer, and this is the problems that they've got. And I narrowly define them. And then 2 years later, you've got customers, all these different areas, and you've got this sales guy who's like selling like crazy in that geography, and you're excited about this, and somebody's got using your product for some other weird purpose, but they're buying it, and so you're happy. So what are the things that kind of draw us away from that perfect ICP and that perfect focus?
It's lack of alignment and lack of leadership. Everybody has to be firing in the same direction, and it starts there. And you have to have a common set of metrics that everybody's looking at. So when you review with the C-suite, the marketing folks, the sales folks, the customer success folks are all looking, CEO, CFO are all looking at the same metrics, and are making the numbers talk and acting based on the real data that it's giving you. I think that's very important. And a lot of organizations have, not put that together in a robust and meaningful way. It's also, even if you have a cogent strategy, it's the annual operating plans that each of the functions put together. If they put them together in a vacuum without collaborating, they may be going in different directions. Also, without getting too technical, the old way of lead management and marketing was to gate content and hope people will leave their information on your website and therefore become a marketing qualified lead after a certain number of interactions. That's really passe in this environment for a couple of reasons. First of all, only 5 to 8% of people that come to your website will ever leave their information. So most of the people that come to your website are anonymous. So what you want to do is understand those anonymous folks that are coming to your website, and also searching your competitor's website and, opening up the dark web, and, so you can create the content that's going to influence them over time versus, if you gate your content and most of the buyer's journey is done before people ever want to be contacted by you or contact you, if all your stuff is gated, they'll never see it. So
Yes.
you're defeating your own purpose. So I think a new kind of MarTech, and when I think of, technology, I think of people, process, technology, data, and analytics have to be in the same direction, have to be modern. If you're still on an MQL basis, what typically happens is sales and marketing are fighting over who gets credit. It doesn't matter who gets credit, because a demand process should be a combined process based on generating revenue for the company, not, who is doing what. And the old MQL and lead process creates some misalignment by its very nature.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I think that's kind of a very powerful application for thinking about what to do with this alignment. And I love that you kind of brought up content strategy. I want to dig into that a little bit further. We've been, at my agency, we've been thinking a lot about content strategy. One of the things that's happening now is with AI, it gives us the ability to more inexpensively create a lot more content. Yeah. And it feels like a lot of people are doing that maybe for SEO purposes, or maybe they just want to get their blog out there. It feels like a lot of companies are doing that kind of randomly. There's just this explosion of content because it's cheaper to write it, because we can have AI write it, right? And maybe we massage it by humans and make it a little bit better, but it's just this explosion of content. So how do you kind of create a content strategy that's in alignment with this ICP and create the discipline from a CMO perspective to make sure that you're really 100% focused on the content that buyer wants? How does that process work, and how do you enforce that kind of strategy and discipline?
Well, you first have to understand the buyer's journey and the customer life cycle and what they care about at different points. Whether they're, in the early research and understanding something that may be a need, to they've decided it's a need and they want to see what options are out there, to they're trying to select a vendor or supplier to do business with. And their content needs are different along the way. And you want to make it easy for people to see the content that they're going to relate to. You can use a lot of MarTech, Sixth Sense, or whatever, demand base, to understand what people are looking for and where they are in the buyer's journey, and serve up content on your website that's persona specific and target multiple members of the buying committee. Because you've got, depending on the size, the deal size, and the ASP, you could have 15 people on the buying committee. So it's important to engage with multiple people, not just one person with the old, lead process, and test, do a lot of tests, fail quickly. Sometimes doing tests and trying different things and looking at different options, and the result is the only way to find the right path. So in terms of AI generated content, you have to keep it genuine. There's a lot of shitty content that's going out there because people are just using ChatGPT and throwing stuff out there. And if you do that, that's not going to last very long, because your content is not going to be relevant to what people need, and it'll look too artificial. I use ChatGPT-4 to, kind of to do a draft, but then I always look at it very carefully and make a lot of changes to it, because, and also ChatGPT, the database is 2 years old. So you have to be really careful how you use it. It's an amazing tool, but it's a tool for us. It can help us. But unless your content really makes sense to the buyer and customers and is genuine, it's going to be looked over. You can't just use, I know there are companies that are using ChatGPT and other generative AI tools to generate lots of content, hoping they'll do better in the search engines. I think Google and the others are getting smarter to make sure that the content is relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to make sure it's relevant. So I want to take a little bit of a step back to what you said in terms of some of the elements in terms of a strategy. You talked about, and I almost feel like this could be a checklist for CMOs to think about whether or not they've got all the pieces in place to have a strategy. You talked about having the ICP, right?
Right.
Making sure that that's in place and that's aligned with all the major functional areas. Talked about having a clear understanding of the buyer's journey and the customer life cycle. Talked about having a clear definition of the personas that we're going after.
Yep.
And then having a content plan that is persona specific, and then a test plan going after, making sure that we're understanding what's happening. So if I went to a client and I said, hey, we want to run a marketing campaign for you, we're a digital agency. I'd like to see all of those things, and you give me all those things, and I'll be able to design an ad campaign that will reach your target persona perfectly. Are those things that most CMOs have in a folder that are kind of ready to go in your experience? Is that the things?
Some yes, some no, and a lot need coaching, and that's what I've helped them through. I mean, one thing missing maybe from what you just said is the right MarTech implemented, so you can see who's coming to your website, you can see who's searching for products like you have, so you can then develop some tailored content based on what people want. I mean, if there are a bunch of people from the same company going to your website and none of them leave an MQL, that's a clear buying sign, and you need to understand that. That's number one. And then, when you look at campaigns, I have a specific definition of campaigns I kind of picked up at Serious Decisions in Forrester. But I think campaigns are long-term integrated initiatives with 4 elements. You want to organize your programs into 4 areas. There's reputation, which seeds demand early. Things like thought leadership, press tours, things that will drive your reputation early. Then there's demand programs, which either can be new logos or acquisition, and also upsell, cross-sell of your existing customers. And then there's customer engagement, things that you're doing to drive your customer satisfaction, NPS, your retention, lower churn, increase net revenue retention. And fourth is sales and customer success enablement. What are those tools you're giving to the sales and customer success force to make them more productive and make them more successful? So I think when you, and campaigns need to be buyer-centric in terms of the pain points that buyers and customers are feeling. So I think, those are some other things that you should have ready before you structure large integrated campaigns that are going to be successful. And of course, pick the right KPIs so you can measure performance as you go along. Maybe that's too much. I don't know, but
no, that's fantastic. So I have 2 questions related to that, but I'll start with the first one. So, as a digital agency, you probably worked with lots of agencies on these kind of campaigns. Do you believe that it's the responsibility of the CMO to have all of this packaged, right? I understand the ICP, I understand the buyer's journey, the life cycle, the personas, I've got my tech in place, got the content strategy, I've got my test plan, and I understand what campaigns I want, everything that we just talked about. And then you go to an agency and say, hey, I need somebody to execute. Or is it better to go to an agency and say, hey, I need help. Can you help me develop the ICP and come up with my buyer's journey and help think through my personas? Where does the agency fit in that whole process of putting all that together?
It depends where the CMO is, what they walked into, what kind of things have been set up. And oftentimes I'll engage vendors and agencies to help me through some of those areas if I don't have it. As I said, this quarter, I'm working with one company to help them with some of those things as well. I'm not an agency. I'm more of an interim and fractional CMO, and I coach and advise and mentor CMOs, but I help them through that process. I think it's both. I think it's both. I think it depends on the needs of the CMO and his or her organization and where they are, and the types of vendors or agencies that they might deploy to get some of these things done. But all of those things are important to launching effective campaigns in my viewpoint, and
So you
staying
might,
alive.
so you might hire a specialist agency in one of those areas, or a strategic agency to help you think about the whole process and kind of help you nail all those things, because you want somebody with deeper experience than you might have on staff.
Yes.
And then, or if you have all that together, then you might hire an agency to kind of run the demand program or run the customer engagement program with your team, depending on what you need. It sounds like
It depends on the staff you have. And I'm a big believer in outsourcing too. I've been in the outsourcing market. I mean, you keep what's core and you outsource the kind of gaps you may have in your organization, whether it's people, process, technology, data, or systems, and or analytics. And depending what you have and the kind of staff you have and how comfortable you are, you may want to outsource some areas to leverage best practices that you don't have in-house.
Yep, that makes sense.
It's a classic outsourcing value proposition.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And the way I think about like our partnerships with clients is we are part of the empire they're building. Sometimes CMOs want to build their own empire. They're all internal people and get rid of outside vendors, but we like to think of ourselves as part of the empire. So anyway, that's
I've always worked with agencies that way. I've made them part of the team.
Yeah. And that's
included them in meetings because they really are,
That's the best way to think about us. We just have a few minutes left, but I just want to come back to that campaign structure that you talked about, because I think this is important. We often work with younger companies, let's say, that are trying to grow and they're trying to think about the campaigns they need. And you talked about reputation or thought leadership campaigns, demand generation programs.
Not campaigns. Elements of a campaign. Four elements of a campaign. So, the mix can be different depending on the campaign, but those are 4 areas you would organize your programs into within a larger, longer running, at least a year running campaign, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. So if a client comes back and says, well, that's all very interesting, that you want to do reputation and demand and customer engagement, but I can only afford one of those. Does it make sense to do that at all? Or should the client be thinking about that all the way across, from sales enablement, customer engagement, demand, brand building? Do you have to include all those, or can a client say, hey, all I really want is the demand piece, just do that?
A lot of companies have over-rotated on demand, and it depends where they are. If they're a startup and they don't have customers yet, you're not going to have much of a customer engagement set of programs because they don't have it yet. If they don't have much of a sales force yet, you probably won't have a lot of sales force enablement, or it depends where customers are. But if they're at a certain point where they've scaled, they've got customers, they've got a sales force or channels of distribution, I would counsel them that they're missing the boat if they just look at demand.
Yep.
Because brand and reputation drives demand. There's a relationship. It seeds demand early, and that's important to do. If companies don't know who you are, your demand efforts are not going to be as robust. And if you don't retain customers, your future financial performance won't be the same. And if you don't give your sales force and customer success folks you can change the mix of what's in each of those 4 areas, but I think you should consider each of those. I think it's important to do that.
Yeah, I think that's really.
I'd push back a bit.
You made a clear case. You've got to really do it all. So that brings us back all the way to this Mythbuster question we were talking about, right? Where you can't really grow your company just by focusing on new customer acquisition past the startup phase, your qualifier. You've really got to think about all of those different elements if you want to be successful. And I think you made a really powerful case about alignment and strategy. That's really critical too. So that's very powerful. Any final thoughts about all those elements? We'd probably talk about this for hours.
We could probably talk about it for hours. I think we covered a lot of ground in a half hour. So thank you again for inviting me. It was my pleasure to be here with you today, and really appreciate your interest in inviting me to your podcast.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here, Alan. Clearly, you've got a lot of deep experience here. If you want to connect with you further and learn more about your services or how they can work with you, how would they do that?
My website is demandrevenue.com. My email is ag@demandrevenue.com. It's hard to spell my last name. My name is Alan Gonsenhauser, Gonsenhauser, which it's a long name, I know, longer than yours. But probably the easiest thing would be to go to my website, because demandrevenue.com is easier to remember.
Perfect. And we'll put a link in the on the website as well.
Thank you.
So thank you, Alan. Great talking to you today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
You too, David. Thank you. Take care. Have a nice weekend.